Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show. We are TruthCat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. It's November 28th, 2024. It's 6:01 p.m. Thanksgiving Day, and no, the title of the show is not Thanksgiving Day 2024, although that has been a reoccurring theme because my show always seems to be on a Thanksgiving. I guess it's a Thursday thing, but we still do it, in spite of the fact that I'm kind of tired from eating turkey. The tea helps. All right, last 3 weeks, I've been talking about corruption in California politics and the property development. Primarily, I was talking about one particular bad guy, Vern Pearson, and I just want to let Vern know I haven't forgotten him, but tonight we're going to talk about something a little more deeper, and I hope I don't lose every one of you tonight, but the title of tonight's show is Oreshnik, Hazelnut of Death. Now that's Grace over there still making noise. It's kind of, I know, it's because there's a light on over there. Got Jose. Jose, go turn that light up for me, which is so Grace shuts up. I was thinking I would have a little video earlier for Thanksgiving Day, and I say, now it's time to say grace. And we will have the bird say grace. And then, of course, her name is Grace. So I'd say, it says, bird, please say grace. And she'd say, grace. Bird joke. Anyway, that would have been funny, huh? All right, Oreshnik, Hazelnut of Death. Okay, what am I talking about? Well, the world changed. The world is changing. Obviously, we're moving from a unipolar world to a multipolar world, and the United States place and the place of the dollar and everything is certainly changing in the world. And as Trump comes in, he's certainly coming into something different. But in response to the Ukrainians firing American-made, Western-made, medium-range, long-range rockets into Russia proper, then the Russians, of course, did something. They fired a new missile called the Oreshnik that we're going to talk about a lot, because this particular new weapon system that was fielded in Ukraine and used once was extremely devastating, non-nuclear, but essentially with the power potentially of a nuclear weapon. They could be delivered extremely fast with a high degree of accuracy. About 50 meters. Gets about 50 meters to the target within a circle of 50 meters, which is pretty good. Might even be less than that. Might be more like 10 meters. But I want to talk about the nature of this missile, what makes it special, the technology. I want to explore the technology and hopefully not bore you too much shitless. But I think it's kind of important because I like to think out loud sometimes, and a lot of this seems to be involved in, not just aerospace per se, but interstellar travel. Now, just to kind of put this into perspective for you, I should mention that I was doing research prior to the show, and I was looking into plasma and ions, revisiting those subjects. But I also wanted to learn about the use of plasma or the creation of plasma in hypersonic vehicles and the various different issues regarding the plasma creation and the manipulation of plasma, if there is anything involved in hypersonic vehicles that are entering orbit or entering into above the atmosphere and then coming back down after achieving large amounts of kinetic energy. So yes, I do need to talk about physics tonight. I want to talk about kinetic energy because the device that was launched in Ukraine on the Uzhmash factory, which basically was a massive rocket factory where a lot of research was going on developing missile systems and rocket systems to be used against Russia. Well, it was completely obliterated, and the warhead used was a kinetic energy delivery device as opposed to a high explosive. There was no bomb. No bomb whatsoever. Kinetic energy. Now, kinetic energy, the United States uses kinetic energy bombs. Hell, they used to make little bullet-looking things about a couple inches long, half-inch wide, made out of steel or something, strength steel with a little sheet metal fin welded on the back of it. And over Vietnam, they dropped these things from high altitude out of bombers by the hundreds of thousands. And by the time they reached the surface of the ground, oh, they were traveling really, really fast. Those are kinetic energy devices. That's like, firing thousands of machine guns, only goes straight down. They also have kinetic energy bombs, which are no more than just things that look like regular bombs, only they're made out of concrete. And yet, when they hit the target from a high altitude, they deliver kinetic energy to destroy the target. One of our most famous kinetic energy bombs, at least the ones that people like to talk about, of course, is the rods of God, which are supposedly telephone pole size pieces of tungsten, something like a foot in diameter, 20 foot long, that are fired from a satellite in space at targets on the ground. Now, I want to, here's the thing, to understand the concepts that we're going to be talking about tonight, a couple things I have to take for granted. A, I have to take it for granted that you're not retarded, you don't think the Earth is flat. Okay, seriously. In order to comprehend the things that we're going to talk about tonight, you have to understand that there are things like an atmosphere, and there are things like space where there is no atmosphere, and plasma, which is created when particles collide with other particles, such as might happen in a particle-dense environment, such as the atmosphere. So when objects with great amounts of mass transition from orbit, where there is no atmosphere, into a atmosphere, a particle-rich, dense, relatively dense field, a field of fluid, if you will. When that happens, certain amounts of kinetic energy is lost. Plasma is created from collision of particles. We'll talk about that. The thing is slowed down, but the point is that there's a lot of kinetic energy involved just in getting something into orbit. Something has to be going something like 30,000 miles an hour, 29,000 miles an hour just to get into orbit. That's on the outside of the atmosphere, which is somewhere between 70 to 100 kilometers. Sorry if you don't want to. I try to get my kilometers converted into miles for you, but let's go back to talking about this Oreshnik. Now, I'm going to talk about other, hopefully, things tonight, but again, I need you to understand that this is not just another rocket, another thing that the Russians made, the bad Russians. This is a complete new departure in technology being used as a weapons system. Now, there is some politics involved because I did some research and I did find out that the United States did develop a Mach 10 missile that was designed for intercepting incoming ICBMs. But it was between 1975 and 1976, and it was canceled because of the treaties that we entered into, which limited medium-range missiles, which we stopped abiding by and which the Russians took advantage of. So this new missile system, the Oreshnik, the Hazelnut, is considered a medium-range missile, and at the same time, it's an ICBM, which means that it's launched into the space above the atmosphere. It travels in somewhat of a parabolic pattern, but it's extremely fast. We don't know much about it, but we do know Putin told us just recently. They're talking about this quite a bit right now, at least in the Russian media directed to the rest of the world. And he did say that the vehicle that they tested or they destroyed the factory with travels at approximately 2.3 to 3 kilometers a second. A second. It can reach targets extremely fast. So what does that mean? Up to, let's see, 2.3 kilometers a second to miles per hour. That comes out to 5,145 miles per hour. At 3 kilometers a second, that's 6,710 miles per hour. That's a lot faster than a bullet. So, amazing. Amazing. Now, just a little earlier, before this show, I got a little more information about what's going to happen in the future regarding this particular weapon system. And Putin again came out and basically said that due to the continued strikes of the Storm Shadows and what's the other name that the Americans use? Taurus. Well, that's the Germans, is the Taurus. Attackums, the Attackums. Compare that to the lowly hazelnut. It's just a hazelnut. Anyway, the next hazelnut is going to be launched in anger November 30th. We have been warned. It's going to be launched on November 30th. We don't know where it's going to be targeted at, but it is suspected that it will be targeted at Kiev, and it will be intended as a decapitation strike, kind of like the Israelis have been constantly waging against Hamas and Hezbollah, trying to take out their leadership. So it's possible at this point that it is time, in the eyes of the Russians, to eliminate Zelensky and his team and whatever is there in Kiev at the time of this attack, including any Westerners and NATO personnel. That's what I would suspect. So we have to understand how it can be done. But again, Putin did say also that this particular attack would involve an actual live warhead, not just some tungsten or cement warhead that destroys a target with kinetic energy. Again, we're going to talk about kinetic energy, but here's one of the things. Let's talk about, again, what we've heard and what we've seen about this thing, this weapon. First of all, we know that it has multiple reentry vehicles. So it's a MIRV, M-I-R-V, multiple independent reentry vehicle. It has a MIRV system. Now, we have nuclear bombs with MIRVs, and sometimes some of the projectiles will be dummies, so that one will have an actual payload and the enemy will have to shoot down dummies also. Well, it's been said that this thing has dozens of projectiles per rocket, and it's been said that this is actually 36 independent targeting vehicles, potentially nuclear. But even if they weren't nuclear, just being a dummy warhead, they would deliver so much inertia that they would equal hundreds of tons or some significant amount of tonnage of TNT with a high degree of precision. Now Putin has said that a couple things, and again, we'll go on observations, but what he said was, A, nothing can defeat it. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll discuss the technology behind why it's unable to be defeated. But he also said that when it strikes its target, it actually breaks down the target into its component particles. So everything becomes dust. It disintegrates what it hits. And there's probably a reason for that based on what happens to matter when it is exposed to that much kinetic energy and particles are forced to break off, become ionic, which is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. We'll get to that boring part. Anyway, so the visuals, when these things were shown coming in through the atmosphere, through the sky above, whatever there was, I assume there was some sort of a cloud cover or something of this nature. But would it pass through this portion of the sky before hitting its target, before impacting with the surface? It brought with it a huge envelope of what we will learn to be plasma. An entire area much larger than the surface of the missile was enveloped in a field that covered a large area and dissipated immediately with the impact. So what was that? Obviously, this was the plasma. Now, again, plasma is the fourth state of matter. I think it's pretty exciting. It's basically when something like a gas, like air, or let's say oxygen, hydrogen, has one of its electrons stripped off of it. I'll read about that. Now, what I'm thinking is that there is some sort of manipulation going on here of the plasma. Now, to me, plasma has some negative effects. Obviously, a re-entry vehicle burning up is a negative, but at the same time, it provides a shield, and the shield can have electrical properties. It can have repellent properties. It can have shielding from X-ray, or not X-ray, but radar. So one of the things I learned, well, I told you there was a paper I was reading that was taken off. It was about plasma and hypersonic vehicles. That was out of UCLA or USC. As soon as I posted it on my page, they went and took the thing down, and it was not available anymore. But they talked about it. One of the things that seemed to be the biggest issues was that when you are firing a missile, or you are trying to create something that has a higher than, well, up to a Mach 10, and it becomes enveloped in a plasma as a natural effect, suddenly you are unable to communicate because the field, which has different magnetic properties and characteristics that encapsulates this thing, the plasma shield, is impervious to radio. You need a really strong system to be able to get through that plasma to transmit instructions to tell that missile what to do, assuming that it doesn't have the ability to do that itself. So we have to assume that these Russian missiles must have the ability to calculate this information themselves, their targeting information, on board without any external help, because of the plasma shield around these things when they're traveling. Now, apparently NASA has a wind tunnel that can generate up to a Mach 10 wind speed, which is pretty incredible. So what they do is they will take a shape to simulate a target, such as a Oreshnik missile entry vehicle or whatever it is that they're going to target, and they will put it inside of this wind tunnel, and a plasma field will be created around this thing as it is simulating flying at Mach 10. And then what they'll do is they'll try to identify some sort of radar signal or feedback that they're going to get using whatever sensor, and then try to take that information and plug it into something that's actually scanning the skies looking for one of these weapon systems getting ready to impact. So in other words, they can't see it. The best they can do is try to simulate what it might look like as it's traveling, and then create some sort of a image, signature image, corresponding to that to look for. Extremely difficult. Well, what else do I want to tell you about these things? Let's look at the plasma here. Tonight I can blame the turkey on my any sort of slowness. Let's see. Complex plasma phenomena. Well, what I've been looking for is what they could possibly be doing. Now, I'll just say this. Let's see. Let's just do a little review here on plasma. One of the things, well, kinetic stuff I want to talk about, but plasma and kinetic, these are two different things. Let's see. Magnetization, plasma potential. Okay. Potential has to do with the charge, but the charge can be manipulated. You know what I really need to do? I need to talk about kinetics. Let me see. Ions? Nah. All right. I'm going to wing it, guys. All right, let's put it this way. Kinetic energy can be measured in joules or foot-pounds or something of this nature. And basically it's the physics of the energy of something that is caused by that thing moving. And it stores this energy. Now, if you are pushing an object, which is essentially how you get something up to speed or you give it kinetic energy, is you need to be pushing it. So obviously a rocket is pushing this thing and producing kinetic energy. The thing about kinetic energy, one of the things that should be considered is the atmosphere. Obviously, it has a very big role. And a lot of times when you are driving a rocket or you are using some sort of a vehicle that requires fuel to get up to speed or introduce this kinetic energy, these joules of movement, forward movement into this device, you have to breathe air from an oxygen-rich environment as opposed to bringing an air with you in a liquid air version on a rocket. So what happens very often is the vehicle that's traveling will actually spend a lot of time going through the atmosphere to build up its speed before it lifts up above the atmosphere and gets into about, what did I say, about roughly Mach 30, Mach 22, yeah, Mach 28. Yeah, you got to get to about Mach 28, which reminds me about those rods from God. Apparently, when you're traveling at Mach 28 up above the atmosphere, about roughly, like I said, 50 to 100 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, more than likely 100. If you try to re-enter, you're going to lose a lot of that speed. There's really no way to get it up, but you're still going to impact around Mach 10. I told you how fast that is. A dense enough device, such as these rods for God that have a significant amount of mass, traveling with that much energy stored in them, will transfer the energy to the thing that they hit, much like a billiard ball. When it hits another billiard ball, suddenly that other billiard ball goes from standing still to traveling at high speed across the table and hits additional balls and causes them to move also. That's the kinetic energy. So when something traveling with that much energy stored in it because it's going so fast and has a certain amount of mass hits another body of mass that isn't moving and transfers that energy, it does have the ability to disintegrate that mass. And this is why something of this nature is very useful for bunker busters, because obviously a device that has a narrow cross section, like a pole, with a point on it, a needle traveling at Mach 10 when it hits the Earth, is going to disintegrate the material around it, but it's going to travel very deep before it loses its kinetic energy and it dissipates into the ground around it. So yeah, it does have the capability of reaching deep underground bunkers, and because it will, again, disintegrate the material, it's going to destroy the bunker. Okay, it's just too much energy. So, yes, the United States doesn't have anything against this. Yes, they are able to deliver these things. But what did we have? Like I said, we had these vehicles that could travel Mach 10, but we didn't have anything that heavy. So they must have an ability to have these up to 36 separate vehicles independently target in spite of having traveling at Mach 10. Again, you can't respond to these things, so it's like traveling from the launch pad in Russia to Germany in, I think it's 15 minutes, something like that. So there's really not much that can be done. The response from the United States, I'm just going to say this. I know that we do have certain Star Wars type devices that perhaps could have the ability to deal with this, such as, well, the shields, the Tesla type device shields. It is possible. But again, if there is a, well, screwing with the plasma, and there is something like going on with the plasma, like causing it to have certain characteristics, magnetic or electronic characteristics that could defeat such a thing, then I would be concerned. Either way, I think that the fact that everybody is kind of ignoring this should be concerning, and I think that, well, let's just put it this way: they've already produced quite a few of these things, and they've said that they're going to produce some other things that are even more revolutionary. And I suspect what we're going to see probably is a longer range version of this thing, which could be even more insane. And I expect that that's probably coming. So basically what this means is that by coming up with a relatively cheap but extremely effective and fast kinetic projectile, they've circumvented the entire nuclear nonsense. You don't need a nuclear bomb when you can deliver a dense warhead at Mach 10 precisely to a target. It has the same effect without the blowback. Now, I should say this, though. I've been looking at the various treaties that the United States had with the Soviet Union, and I don't really know what they've got going on with Russia at this point. I don't think anything, but they did have the START Treaty, which significantly reduced the amount of nuclear weapons and launch vehicles in both countries. And of course, I don't trust any of this stuff. But there were other treaties involving the medium-range missiles that I was looking for. But I did run into one treaty that was signed in '76, and it was basically saying that it was okay for the United States or Russia to have non-military underground nuclear testing in areas other than nuclear testing facilities or even other countries, assuming that they were okay with it and it was all being observed by the other countries. So in other words, what does that mean? That means that they signed a treaty with the Russians that said that they can use nuclear bombs to build bunkers across the country and in other countries where they were going to do this. So in other words, every time they launch one of these things or they drop one of these things down a hole and blow up one of these big cavities that they use to make these bunkers, the other guys know about it because of the nuclear signature. So I find that very interesting. 8 kilometers per second. Wow, isn't that something? Mach 24. That's in orbit. We're talking about the big rod from God thing. But remember, the rod from God, that was a tiny amount of bombs, maybe a dozen of them up in a space costing extremely large amounts of money to get up there and to maintain. Unlike these missiles that they can produce relatively quick, that probably use a solid propellant that goes pretty damn fast, really quick, and they can mass produce these things and essentially drop rods from God wherever they want for a lot less money, and we don't have the capability. We can't see it. That's really all I want to say tonight, you guys. I'm not going to, I know it's very disappointing. This is actually a big deal, of course, because it's world changing. And I'll tell you, you don't forget about the Iskanders and the Kinjal missiles and the other hypersonic missiles, because those are just as equally deadly, and those are equally easily able to take out an aircraft carrier anytime they want. But now you've got this. Just one has 36 independent warheads, each one. Hell, there's nothing left of that factory. It's completely gone. It was a huge area, this factory, and it's completely gone. And nobody wants to talk about the damage, probably because it left huge craters. Whatever there was underneath that thing is gone too. Nobody wants to talk about it. They think that they're going to field a few Patriot missiles, and that's going to do it. No, I don't think so. Anyway, so I'll just say this before I go. I'm not going to waste too much time, but I'll say Donald Trump has been making some appointments that have been not good. Seriously, I mean, if you like JFK in there, great, but he's been appointing a huge number of Zionists and guys that want to basically start World War III, neocons, mostly Zionists. So this is not a good thing. And I could name a few. Gorka is one of them. The guy he just put in there, Kellogg, the envoy to Russia, he's another. But there's so many of them. So it doesn't really matter. And I think Russia is waiting to see what Trump does, and thank God for that. But if Trump does something stupid as soon as he's in there, I don't think it's going to work out, because I know he likes to try to be a businessman, and he wants to come at the thing with a tough attitude. He wants to shove his way through. He may call that diplomacy, but I don't think the Russians are going to go for that right now. And I think that if anything, they have all the cards. So if they give Trump any kind of concessions, I think it's going to be at their convenience, out of respect for Trump. We'll see what happens. But I'm sure with some of these people he's got in there right now, it's not going to be very good. So anyway, so the world is changing. And again, like I said, I wanted to look a little bit more into the nature of plasma, but it's probably not worth it. I think kinetic energy is something that people should probably learn more about. Obviously, plasma too, the concept of ions. And certainly, I think that's going to help us understand what the hell is going on with these new weapon systems that they're fielding. Anyway, all right, that's it. Sorry, you guys. Once again, I'm going to blame it on the turkey, but it's complex information, and I don't really understand it myself. I'd really like to, but I definitely know there's more going on than a plasma sheath around this thing. I definitely think they're manipulating it in a large way. And remains to be seen what exactly is happening. But I feel like we're in 1940s or 1950s, and somebody just did a hydrogen bomb, and we're all kind of freaking out, wondering what the heck that was. It's kind of one of those moments, and yet this time we're the ones behind the Iron Curtain, and we're not getting the truth. So obviously, this is something that they don't want us to know, because why else would they remove that technical paper from USC that I was reading about hypersonic vehicles just before the show? They don't want me reading it. They don't want you reading it. The link is now dead. But I did post a quote. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the quote. Since they didn't want you to hear this, they didn't want you reading this, what I will share with you is just this one little bit that I cut and paste from this bit of information that they removed. But in it, they were talking about a hypothetical hypersonic airliner. So if you had such a hypersonic airliner weighing 200,000 kilograms, similar to a fully loaded Boeing 77 would have in flight, had this hypersonic airliner had a crash accident due to unfortunate circumstances, its kinetic energy at Mach 5, not 10, but 5, would be equivalent to 70 tons of TNT, or 7 times the explosive yield of a GBU 43/B Moab, the most advanced thermobaric weapon available. A hypothetical hypersonic airliner weighing 200,000 pounds would be as much as in Moab. So obviously, if this thing's traveling at Mach 10, it's going to weigh a lot less than 200,000 pounds. Who knows what it is? 500 kilos, who knows what? 1,000 kilos each, who knows? But if you do the math, you're going to understand the equivalent in TNT that it's going to deliver. So yeah, there's a reason why we don't have hypersonic airliners. Too much kinetic energy. That's why they worry about space debris and stuff like that. You know, coming out of orbit. Oh, yeah. Unless, of course, it's flat Earth. It's coming out of orbit because they launched it and it hit the firmament and it's bouncing back. Yeah, you guys are... Anyway. All right, guys. Sorry if I bored the hell out of you. I know you're I hope you enjoyed you guys in the USA. I hope you enjoyed your holiday. And thank you for listening, who's ever still here. Let me just see who's still here. Again, shout out to Wooter and everybody in Europe that stayed up late to listen to me. Let's see if he's still here. Yeah, he's still there, looks like. All right, guys. If you want to help me out financially, please use the PayPal, which is StephenKelly714 at yahoo.com. All right, and you got to say friends or family. Otherwise, I got to send it back. All right, everyone. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for hanging out with me tonight. And God willing, I'll talk to you all real soon. Once again, my name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show, and we are TruthCat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. I hope I see you next week, okay? All right. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.